Hello and welcome to Exposed News Outlet. My name is Andrea and I will be your host. I wanted to catch everyone up to speed with the fast-moving clown car of chaos that is Trump's terribly unqualified sycophants and elite oligarchs, which he's tapped for his cabinet selection, and how these corrupt oligarchs live by a completely separate set of rules. But before I do, if I could just ask that you please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already and select the notification bell. Be sure to select all so that you get all of my latest updates and videos. Also, if you can please like and share my videos, I would really appreciate it. It really helps me out a lot. It helps to get my videos out to the masses and people who wouldn't otherwise see it and into the algorithms. Now more than ever, independent news is critical as facts and fact-checking, cross-referencing are as well in a world of disinformation and increased brainwashing and propaganda. And thank you for supporting my independent news channel. Also, I wanted to let you know, as I am a new journalist and I'm starting up my channel and trying to get it up off the ground, I do have a GoFundMe as I'm trying to get everything set up and get the final items and technology and stuff. It's all pretty expensive. Luckily, I have the basics to make these videos, but there's quite a bit of stuff that I still need. So if you are able to, I do realize that a lot of people might not financially be in the situation to help, but if you are able to, please go to the GoFundMe and check that out. I promise I'm not going to be constantly asking for help or handouts or anything like that. I just need to get the basic startup going. Thank you very much. Without further ado, let's get to the video. I find it funny when grown, middle-aged, straight men call other men like their cult leader, Trump, Daddy. People like Tucker Carlson, who repeatedly called Trump Daddy on stage at a rally. And then these Ivy League sissy elites that want to throw around homophobia, even transphobia, now that they've found that they get a lot of attention for completely exploiting these marginalized community members. And even worse, these seniors, these senile seniors, are bullying middle school and high school kids. Anyone they oppose or anyone that doesn't look like them or support their bigotry and hypocrisy and self-entitlement. These men think and act and oftentimes even get away with murder, literally, quite figuratively and quite literally. And now, because of these unhinged individuals in modern day, the white nationalist cultists that make up the Maga authoritarian regime, because many of the individuals have given up their ability of free thinking or even the use of their brain altogether. Instead, they want to be told what to think, what to say, and how to say it, and are completely disrespectful on full attack mode. Because let's be clear, these individuals don't want the truth or knowledge. Instead, they want confrontation and problems. And then to have these same bigots lie to and confuse black and brown individuals, and sadly, a small part of the LGBTQ community as well. Supposedly, anyway, 12% of the LGBTQ community voted for MAGA. Why would you vote for a party and agenda literally trying to take your rights away? I just don't get that. Just like the women that voted for Trump. Like, what? Simply because they're ignorant, for one, and they see confrontation, chaos, drama, and are motivated by these clickbait, disinformation, and straight-up propaganda campaigns that they have rampant online. And instead of fact-checking or cross-referencing, they go along with the propaganda and conspiracies literally from the very ones seeking to strip all of our rights away and much-needed resources, such as Social Security, which many have paid into their whole working adult lives, Medicaid, Medicare, and just like Republicans love taking away health care and resources instead of helping end childhood poverty like Biden and Harris have worked on, as well as many Democratic governors around the country like the great Tim Walz of Minnesota, Gavin Newsom, and others. Instead, they want to punish those whom have already lived a rough life, marginalized, taken advantage of simply because they weren't as lucky as these Republican oligarchs, whom were mostly all born into trust funds and estates. Many of them have never had to worry about living paycheck to paycheck or health care. In fact, the government officials, especially the corrupt Republican individuals that seek to remove these resources from the vulnerable individuals that need it the most of them are millionaires or billionaires. So regardless of the economy or what, policies they pass, they'll be just fine. And this is just like the awful laws these Republicans are implementing, that homeless people, if they fall asleep or even nap outside in public, they will be arrested or fined, as if the homeless people can afford fines. This is unconstitutional and unconscionable. How anyone, let alone public officials whom are supposed to protect all citizens, including the homeless ones, which many of these homeless individuals became homeless because of the opioid epidemic, which at the end of the day, Big Pharma walked away from pretty much scot-free. And now they're actually asking for a bailout, by the way. But compared to all of the horrible reactions to their highly addictive drugs, which they knew were extremely addicting, and these CEOs and corporate elites running Big Pharma, part of the top 1%, I might add, instead they want to further torture the very individuals that were just trying to live their best lives. Many of them have made poor choices. However, most are desperately trying to pull their lives together. And frankly, instead of criminalizing homelessness and poverty, as these Republicans have already started to implement here in Iowa and around the nation in Republican districts, and I'm sure they'll try it in other Republican states if they haven't already, as well as implementing the 922 pages of the Project 2025. It's important, with all of the chaos on these nominees that Trump has selected, because just one of them has their own scandals that could take up a whole day to address. But I will try to outline the most crucial and important ones as I see fit. Because honestly, we would be busy for weeks going down all the rabbit holes, and most of these individuals won't even make it to the hearings, and they won't make the cut. However, their replacements aren't going to be much better. This is a corrupt authoritarian regime trying to take control of all aspects of government without oversight, which is unconstitutional and against our rights and freedoms, as well as the rule of law and equality, all of which are under attack. Let me play this clip where the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, is speaking about the recommendation panel that Trump and his billionaire oligarch buddy, Elon Musk, came up with to gut overspending.
Elon and Vivek don't need much of an introduction here in Congress.
The party of Trump dusts off the old playbook.
There is an enormous amount of waste, fraud, and abuse in the government.
As Republicans begin saying the quiet part out loud.
John Thune, who is the Senate incoming Republican leader, who also met with Elon Musk this morning, told me that perhaps mandatory programs are areas that they're looking to make cuts in, like Social Security, for example.
Then another day of bad headlines for Trump's Pentagon pick.
I don't answer to anyone in this group. None of you. Not to that camera at all.
Senator Richard Blumenthal on where the Hegseth nomination is going.
And as long as Donald Trump wants me in this fight, I'm going to be standing right here in this fight.
And new evidence in the shooting death of an insurance executive. And All In starts right now. Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Congress is back and they are ready to get going in the Trump era. So what, you might ask, the top priority as we approach this new Republican trifecta? Well, in the past 24 hours, House Speaker Mike Johnson has spent much of his energy talking up two billionaires nobody voted for, who have been deputized by Republicans to make the government do less for you.
We're all excited. I know you're all excited that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy have joined us today. Oh, this is an important day. It's the beginning of a journey. You've heard what DOGE is all about, the Department of Government Efficiency. It's a new thing, and this is a new day in Washington and a new day in America.
So this incoming Speaker of the House, current Speaker of the House, basically spent his day at the Capitol giving Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy a tour of the place. Here's a shot of the trio meeting lawmakers on the Hill. That's a photo that was shared on social media by Utah Senator Mike Lee. Now, part of the reason congressional Republicans are feting these two far-right rich guys and their new, like, made-up, not actual governmental Department of Government Efficiency is because they have vowed to slash the size of the federal government by cutting an astounding and indeed unbelievable $2 trillion out of the budget. Now, just to be clear, because budget math is very easy to lose sight of, top line of this is it's a preposterous, wildly radical, effectively impossible goal. Just like their plan to cut the number of federal agencies by more than 75%. But, this is key, the House Speaker is behind it.
Musk wants to take government agencies from 428 to 99. Can it be done?
We certainly hope so. We want to be willing partners in that.
Remember the old line as Grover Norquist quote back in the day about Republicans wanting the federal government small enough to drown in a bathtub? Well, apparently Musk and Ramaswamy and the whole Maga leadership also want to cut off its limbs to make the drowning easier. This right here, what we saw on display on Capitol Hill with Musk and Ramaswamy and Johnson, this is probably the most glaring internal contradiction inside the MAGA movement, if you want to call it that, the Trump-era GOP, and it is also one of its biggest political vulnerabilities. I would say its biggest. And is now going to be thrust into the center of the national discourse immediately. Because when you look at how much they want to cut, you realize that what they really want to do is cut into the social safety net that millions, tens of millions of Americans, including millions of Trump voters, depend on to live every day.
You look at the way in which that money is being spent through Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. People love to have lazy armchair discussions about, oh, are you going to make cuts to entitlements or not? When, in fact, the dirty little secret is that many of those entitlement dollars aren't even going to people who they were supposed to be going to in the first place.
Not really a dirty little secret. In fact, they almost entirely go to people they should be going to. This is an old, hoary cliche, right, among people on the right. We're going to find these inefficiencies in the programs and cut that. No one gets hurt. But I don't think that is why Republicans like Mike Lee, Utah senator, are so excited about this undertaking. Remember, he is a senator who posted this fawning picture of Musk and Vivek at the Capitol. Lee also said in his first successful Senate campaign in 2010, while speaking to supporters, it will be my objective to phase out Social Security, to pull it out by the roots. Medicare and Medicaid are of the same sort. They need to be pulled up. And on Monday, Lee posted a 24-tweet thread calling Social Security, quote, classic bait and switch, and, quote, an outdated, mismanaged system. And within half an hour, Musk had retweeted Lee, adding to the note, interesting thread. Already, Republicans in the House and the Senate are laying the groundwork to go after the bedrock social insurance programs.
We got to bring the Democrats in and talk about Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare. There's hundreds of billions of dollars to be saved, and we know how to do it. We just have to have the stomach to actually take those challenges on.
I did not think this is where this was going, but they look like they're going for it. And again, they have no choice if they want to really cut trillions out of a $6.8 trillion budget. This is just the math of it. Again, this is sort of a little budget one-on-one here, but it's useful to do this just when you think of these numbers. Here's a pie chart of the entire federal budget for fiscal 2023 from economist Steve Ratner. You see that quarter of the pie at the upper right that is not outlined in yellow. That represents all of the government's discretionary spending on stuff that is not defense, so-called non-defense discretionary spending, basically a quarter of the budget, right? That's the spending that Congress approves and can revoke. It's things like the big farm bill and stuff like that. It's all the appropriations, that quarter. Keep this in mind, one quarter, right? It's all the appropriation that government shutdowns, for instance, happen over. From like inspecting your meats and produce to maintaining the National Park Service, all your science funding, international diplomacy, law enforcement, education. It's all in there, and it's still just a quarter of the budget. You could cut it all, hollow out the government, close all the national parks, get rid of all the meat inspectors, and you would still only save you $1.5 trillion, okay? If you want to save more, you have to cut from the part of the pie outlined in yellow, which is defense, and then what's called non-discretionary spending. That's spending the government does no matter what, right? It's baked in, as it were. And to be clear, on the defense side, you could cut a lot from defense. There's a lot of waste in the Pentagon. In fact, they just failed an audit again. They've never passed one And many people who watch closely the defense budget will tell you that much of the waste in defense comes from contracting, which is an enormous part of that budget. Of course, that would probably involve cutting off a lot of contractors like, I don't know, Elon Musk, whose companies get $3.6 billion in contracts from the DoD, according to the New York Times. That's probably not going to be where he lets the axe down, right? So again, you look back at the pie, specifically the other half at the bottom, that is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So where do you go if you want to cut trillions out of the budget? Remember what the outlaw Willie Sutton said when they asked him why he robbed banks? Because that's where the money is. That is why Republicans always end up coming back to try and raid the social safety net, those mandatory programs. They always got to go there. That's the bank. That's where the money is. We have gone through this before. When George W. Bush won re-election in 2004, 20 years ago, the last time a Republican actually managed to win more votes than their opponent in a national election, he campaigned on basically, fighting terrorism, winning the war on terror, and keeping same-sex marriage illegal. But when he won, he barnstormed the country, pushing a plan to essentially privatize Social Security and turn it into a private retirement account like a 401k. And in just months, public disapproval of Bush's handling of Social Security shot up by double digits to 64%. In fact, his plan was so unpopular, it never even got a vote in Congress. Republicans tried again in 2012 when Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan campaigned on an austerity budget that included a raise in the retirement age, cuts to many benefits. Remember the Ryan budget? It was a huge part of that campaign. And again, they lost narrowly, but they lost in part because they could never shake their image as rich elitists squeezing the little guys, right? Coming for your Social Security check. And here's the thing, Donald Trump, as much of a mess as the man is, he did seem to get this part of it. It's why he has felt the need to loudly insist, going back to 2015, he opposes cuts to social insurance programs, even as he run to the right of other Republicans on other issues like immigration and is democracy a good thing or not? But this was core. It shows up in the polling. People actually trusted Trump on these sort of questions of social insurance programs. So now Trump, let's be clear here, right? First time in 20 years, Republican actually gets more votes than their opponent. Big deal, right? Big cause for celebration on the right. He's been reelected. And he's letting these two deeply weird, unelected Silicon Valley oligarch billionaires just take a look under the hood of the United States budget. Tinker around with its most sensitive parts, including the American social safety net. The cornerstone of the government's social contract with its citizens. And if history has taught us anything, I don't think Americans are going to go for it. Joining me now is Texas Democratic Congressional Progressive Caucus, and Faz Shakir, Senior Advisor to Senator Bernie Sanders and Executive Director of the nonprofit media group More Perfect Union. Congressman, let me start with you. I've had to kind of update my priors on this. This whole Elon Musk thing seemed like a...
Get the QuickBooks mobile app. Simply snap photos of receipts, tap, and sort.
It started with an interview, and Trump was kind of like, yeah, you'll do, knock yourself out, sort of lip service. And, at some point, I think your colleague AOC described it as handing your little kid brother a controller that's not plugged in. So they could play. But watching today, I'm like, they're going to do this? They're going to do it. They're going to come for trillions of dollars. Is that your understanding? They're serious about this now?
I mean, it's clear that these are incoherent, incompetent, self-serving, wannabe oligarchs. And so it's not clear exactly what their plan is. But like you said, Chris, time and time again, they can't help themselves. They want to provide tax cuts for their billionaire buddies. It doesn't matter what they campaign on. In my first term in Congress, where the Republicans took over the House and they supposedly campaigned on crime and being tough and jobs, the first bill had nothing to do with that. It was a bill. The first vote I was asked to take was a bill to cut the IRS's enforcement division that had been expanded, that was supposed to be going after offshore bank accounts and billionaire tax cheats. I mean, that's what they tend to always come back to. And as you pointed out, it is a huge opportunity for progressives to reshape the priorities of the Democratic Party and tank Trump's numbers by pointing this out and making it really clear that doesn't matter what Trump says. Seems like what he does is put these ridiculous billionaires in charge and try to go after your grandmother's Social Security check.
You know, Faz, 8 years ago when this was happening, so it was Bixteen and Inauguration Day, remember where Trump did that thing where there was a carrier plant that was going to close down in Indiana, and he said, you know, you can't close down, and he made a big deal out of it. The whole thing, like everything with Trump, was a bit of a bait and switch. The jobs went away anyway. But I remember thinking at the time, like, ooh, the Democrats are in trouble if these are the politics he pursues. My feeling about what
happened heard from him.
Right. Well, what unfolded on Capitol Hill today is like 180 degrees the opposite of that. Like, I can't imagine a thing Democrats want more than a big fight over not cutting Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid.
Yeah, but it's also curious to me that Trump is just sitting there quietly, like this guy's never shy of the TV, and he's letting a lot of these people just get out there and start making some policy on their own, I guess. And so you've got these guys running over to Capitol Hill, and now, as you say, Chris, we've got the opportunity for a philosophical debate, because one of the things at play here is this idea that government efficiency. Here's these billionaires; they've run big for-profit enterprises. They're going to come in and fix government, and this is where we get into philosophy, because you're going to realize that these people in the for-profit sector are always seeking to maximize profit. The government has a different job. The government looks out for people. It looks out for people in their well-being. And what we find when you look at Social Security and Medicare, it is efficiency, actually. There is not overhead. What you find in the private markets is an upcharge for retirement, for providing health care. That's where the inefficiencies lie. Government has mastered this and done this well. But we're going to have a great philosophical debate, and I welcome it, because you're basically having a reveal of a billionaire class who thinks with great ego that we know how to solve this problem. And really, we're not going to tell you that we actually want to deprive people of their well-being. We're going to hide the ball from you on that one. We're going to talk big numbers and big math, $2 trillion in cuts. Right. Like half the federal workforce is going to be eliminated. Okay, we're going to have a great philosophical debate here.
That's the point, because Congressman, it's also, this is one of the places where when you have to govern, right, rhetoric gets concretized into things like votes, right, and budget. So, they've been talking about, Ramaswamy's been going around saying there's this $500 billion of unauthorized spending, which is not really true. It's a sort of tortured understanding of that. But, Stephen Ratner went through and was like, okay, well, here's what that stuff actually is. Well, the top line item they're coming after is VA healthcare, okay, at $119 billion. The National Institutes of Health, Pell Grants, Head Start, the FBI, federal prisons. Like, is it your understanding you're going to have votes on this stuff? And I imagine those are not going to be difficult votes for the Democratic caucus.
I mean, Elon Musk knows about tweeting and spending other people's money. I mean, he doesn't know anything about government. And so when you ask whether we can expect to have votes on this, I don't think Elon Musk even knows what that means. I don't think he'd explain that to you. But if they bring us votes to try to slash veterans' health care, you're going to have a united Democratic caucus against that, and then a tiny margin for Republicans where those Republicans will have to choose whether to go along with a crazy Elon Musk Trump plan to cut VA health care and then suffer the political consequences, which I think would be a wipeout of the Republican majority, or that we might have a moment on our hands like when Trump tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, where Republicans either out of conviction or out of political expediency decide to tank the whole thing. And so I think that what's going to be required is the Progressive Caucus that I was just now elected to chair to quickly come out in front and say we can't lose a single Democratic vote on this, and make sure the Democratic message is unified, that we're with the people on this one and that we're against the billionaires. And I think that contrast is going to be important. We can't just say, hey, we're with the people. I think it's important for us to also say who we're fighting against, because people know that they're feeling screwed, and it's important for us to point out who's actually screwing them. It's not undocumented immigrants taking away their health care. It's not a trans person that's coming after Social Security checks. It's Elon Musk. It's Donald Trump. It's the people who said they were for working people, but really they're for themselves.
Yeah, and
let's go.
We believe it's an historic moment for the country, and these two gentlemen are going to help navigate through this exciting new day. Elon and Vivek don't need much of an introduction here in Congress for certain, and most of the American people know what they're capable of and what they've achieved. Someone did a little survey of how many federal employees are actually working in the office. By one estimate, it may be about 1% if you don't count the security personnel that are covering these buildings. That is absurd. And it's not something the American people would stand for. And so one of the first things that I think you'll see is a demand from the new administration and from all of us in Congress that federal workers return to their desks and get back to the work that they're supposed to be doing. I think that is common sense. What you're going to see here, the overriding theme here, is a return to common sense and a return to accountability and efficiency in government. I think that's going to serve the people well.
Although these aren't the outrageous contracts to Elon's own companies that they're wanting to cut. No, he's wanting to get rid of the entitlements like Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare. And let me be clear, they've also been talking about privatizing Medicaid and Medicare. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Other countries have free health care for all of their citizens and other programs that far exceed the resources and programs that we have in America today. And there's no reason why they should target the most vulnerable, just like Trump attempted to do last term when he was in office. Or this video of Mike Johnson last year at one of the conservative Republican forums where Mike Johnson himself claims that we must hack away at funding for Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, as well as much needed resources for the American people that they want to take away.
It's an important point, isn't it? And again, once again, this is going to set those of you who, and RSC, potentially on a collision course with others who call themselves conservatives, but who have a more populist bent, and who are more comfortable with the government doing things that you think are inconsistent with conservative principles. This leads me to my next question. I think that principle number 2 of your 7 was limited government, right?
Right.
Was that 2 or 3? I can't remember.
Number 2, right after individual freedom.
Individual freedom and limited government. And I think you and I would agree that individual freedom and limited government are, opposite sides of the same coin. Right. It's difficult as somebody dedicated to principles of limited government to see the ballooning out of the deficit and a complete abandonment of entitlement reform. Your thoughts? We'll start with Mike and we'll go to Mark.
We have to get back to it as a number 1 priority. The CBO says that entitlement spending, which they define as Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, interest on the debt, right? Those 4 obligations will eclipse GDP in, a dozen years or something. I mean, this can no longer be kicked down the road. You can't wait 8 years to address this. It has to happen yesterday. So we have to have our hand at the wheel and do this. We are completely derelict in our duty. We're rearranging furniture on the Titanic if we don't get this problem under control.
This is not what the American people wanted, and it's not even what those that were duped into voting for Trump wanted, as Trump promised to not make any cuts to Social Security, Medicaid, or Medicare, and other detrimental resources, which, by the way, many of you may not use at this time, but you will need it when you retire or as you get older. Others may use Medicaid, and you might be at risk at losing your health care, which is wrong. When is America going to wake up to the fact that these Republicans are bought and paid for, or they themselves are elite millionaires and billionaires that don't worry about bills living paycheck to paycheck, like Elon Musk or even Vivek Ramaswamy, both billionaires. Ramaswamy is a billionaire with a net worth of over $1 billion. Let me play this clip.
The world's richest billionaire, Elon Musk, and near billionaire Vivek Ramaswamy were on Capitol Hill today to join a bunch of other really rich senators to go over the plan for the misnamed Department of Government Efficiency, which is not really a department. Part of the plan includes spiking unemployment by laying off millions of federal employees and gutting federal agencies. Musk and Ramaswamy have already promised massive cuts to federal agencies Republicans don't like. They also want to cut $500 billion a year from the federal budget and fire the vast majority of federal workers. All told, they want to slash $2 trillion in government spending. DOGE has no statutory authority and is essentially a presidential advisory commission that can make recommendations. Neither Musk nor Ramaswamy have any public service experience, but that's not stopping them. Their targets include the Department of Defense, Sesame Street, the IRS, the Department of Justice, and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They're also looking to kill any government programs that have their spending authorization set to expire. And you may want to think twice about celebrating some of this stuff, because the proposal would include ending veterans' health care programs, drug development and opioid treatment, housing assistance programs, health care programs, student loan programs, and Head Start. Republicans and some Democrats are rushing to sign up with this Presidential Advisory Commission's branch in Congress. Publicly, they're celebrating Musk and Ramaswamy's plan to gut the government. But what they say privately is a different story. One senior Republican aide told Punchbowl News, two people who know nothing about how the government works, pretending they can cut $1 trillion, both with decent pulpits to preach from, and the ear of an unpredictable president? Disaster. The only good thing is that at some point they'll overpromise and get bounced by Trump. But until then, disaster. Joining me now is Congressman Maxwell Frost of Florida, a member of the House Oversight Committee. There are some Democrats, Congressman, who are tempted to join up with the DOJ committee. That's the real committee, the congressional committee associated with this advisory group. Are you one who is tempted to do so?
Well, as of now, it's not even a committee. It's a caucus, which anyone can make a caucus of anything at any time in Congress. But this is what I'll say. Look, we're going to find room where we can work together, of course, over the next 2 years with our Republican colleagues. But let's be honest about DOJ and this whole thing. It's a joke. We're talking about two billionaires who are cosplaying as government officials, not an actual department of this government. It's an X account right now. And here's my thing. I'm all for making our government more efficient. But we got to look at the proposition here. The proposition of these two guys is that to make the government more efficient, we got to fire a bunch of people and take away a bunch of funding. And that lack of nuance and actually providing real oversight on how we can make the government work in a better way shows me firsthand that they're not coming at this on the right foot and not coming at it from the right place. I mean, look at Elon Musk. I mean, this isn't even to mention the horrible discrepancies we've seen and the fact that Elon Musk has a vested interest with government contracts. So we have to look into this this issue that we have right now with these two billionaires coming in.
I will note that Musk owns companies with federal contracts. Tesla has at least $352,000 in contracts. SpaceX at least $15.4 billion with at least 12 agencies. Wonder if DOJ is going to plan to cut any of those. But, you know, to what the point you just made, it strikes me that, you know, a lot of Americans say, I want government to be run like a business. Well, this is what it looks like, right? They don't have to think twice about how government works. They just come in and say, cut that, cut that, cut that, cut that, and I'm going to go have lunch. I want to play something from, this is, I don't even know if you were alive when this ran. This was in the late 1980s or late 1990s. And this was Jim Miklaszewski of NBC News talking about cutting overspending at the Pentagon.
Despite a promise to reform the system, the Pentagon revealed today that it's still wasting millions of dollars each year in the purchase of spare parts. For example, for an Air Force KC-135, the Pentagon paid $75.60 each for 187 set screws that should cost 57 cents. That's a 13,000% increase in the price.
Now, Congressman, this is one area where I actually agree with people who say we need to cut waste in the government. The Pentagon has been bloated and overspending and buying $500 hammers since I was in high school in the 80s. And so this is one where and look at where the spending goes. $71.6 billion in defense spending is spent in Texas, $68 billion in Virginia, $60 billion in California, of $32 billion in your state of Florida, and $27 billion in Maryland. So the interest that these government contractors have in their bloated spending, which is overcharging Americans for real, is distributed throughout all these very important states. And those states have senators who are going to want to defend that spending, and congressmen who are going to want to defend it. Is it feasible for someone like an Elon Musk to say, we're just going to go ahead and start slashing defense spending, which I think a lot of Americans would actually want, and have those people in those states stand down for that?
If that's something they're serious about, I think they'll find bipartisan support on it, right? 75% of our military budget goes towards contractors. And like you pointed out, a lot of these contractors are completely stiffing the American people and ripping away our tax dollars. And a lot of this money goes unaccounted for. I actually have a bill. It's a bipartisan bill, Defense Oversight Act, which passed through the NDAA, which helps empower the inspectors general to make sure that we can figure out where this money is going. So if they're serious about that, I'm in. But like I told you at the beginning, I'm just looking at the way they're coming at this whole thing. Zero nuance, just talking about cutting stuff without looking at it. And I don't know, I'm a bit skeptical that Elon Musk is going to be serious about actually cutting defense spending and looking at these contractors. But we'll see. We'll see. Again, this guy has not had one single successful business that hasn't leached onto taxpayer money. And so we'll see how serious he is about that.
Exactly. To cut government federal contractors that have defense spending that get tax money for defense, but he'd have to cut his own companies. He is in business in Texas and in Florida with government contracts. You're right. He's been made a billionaire by federal tax money going into his businesses. I want to get your comment before I let you go. Trump has picked yet another billionaire. There are about half a dozen billionaires in his new administration. A guy named Jared Isaacman in the next door neighboring district to yours to lead NASA. He's a 41-year-old founder and CEO of a payment processing company called Shift4. He's flown to space twice on commercial SpaceX missions, but he's never worked in NASA or in the federal government. He partnered with Musk and SpaceX in 2022 to pay for the launch of the Polaris program, which is 3 private space flights. He seems to be buddies with Elon Musk, and I guess being a billionaire is his qualifications to lead NASA. Your thoughts?
Same thing on Elon and Ramaswamy. Trump, it looks like he wants to be surrounded by a bunch of people with no experience that are simply happy to cosplay and dress up like government officials. This is a billionaire who spent his own money to go to space and act like an astronaut and be like an astronaut, and now he's going to lead NASA? And it's not leaving NASA just any time. Next year, we have Artemis 2 that is going to send people around the moon for the first time in a long time. This mission is critical because it's going to lead to Artemis 3, where we're actually going to start setting up a station on top of the moon and then actually land on the moon again.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is the truth behind the COVID pandemic, sadly, that mostly devastated the elderly. I won't make accusations, though, that I can't prove. It's important to note and to realize and to see it for what it is. The top 1%, many of whom have recently been held accountable from the government for wrongdoing, monopolies, fraud, and safety violations, among other violations and felonies. And they have an axe to grind with the American government, frankly. And again, many of these, like I said, are the top 1%, the elite oligarchs. The very people that Bernie Sanders and Kamala Harris, countless others have warned us about. The same reason that they spent so much money trying to spread hate and disinformation, pushing racism, xenophobia, and transphobia, as well as blatant bigotry and hate towards the LGBTQ community and those whom are spiritually conscious and on a higher consciousness altogether. Those that can see right through all of the bullshit, and many that can even read their minds, as well as remote viewing and other higher consciousness abilities that all humans can do, frankly. Some are more gifted than others, but really, just like exercise, anyone can do it with the right diet, education, and practice. And it's much easier than you think. Instead, they want to tell you your thoughts and what to say and how to act. This is supposed to be the free world, and we're supposed to have rights and the Constitution and other protections, which billionaires are trying to sell us off and enrich themselves more, while they make the middle and lower class suffer. And sadly, many of these people who voted for Trump thinking that he would really help them are going to get a sad wake-up call. I still don't understand. Just like he said he was going to do all this stuff last time and it was all broken. I mean, why would you buy it again? In fact, the cabinet selections so far are the richest billionaires and millionaires in America. Biden's cabinet net worth is altogether $118 million. Biden's current Senate-approved cabinet net worth altogether, the whole cabinet is worth $118 million. Which, I mean, it may sound like a lot to us, but let's compare this to Trump's current cabinet. Far exceeds $350 billion, with over $10 billion in net worth in the Senate-approved cabinet nominees alone. Elon's current net worth alone is estimated at over $337 billion. Altogether, they may be closer to 400 or over 400 billion. And actually, with a net worth of $6.5 billion, Trump is sadly the richest president in history of the country, and literally the face of the elitism, which he accuses others of being. And what's more is that the people that voted for him this election, most of them, average Americans, are the ones that will be impacted the most by these sociopath billionaires looking to take funding away from the important resources so that they can get their billionaire tax cuts and have a better bottom line. They want to make these absurd free rides permanent, by the way. These tax-free rides that Trump keeps giving the billionaires, they want to make them permanent. I mean, it's just crazy. While the rest of us struggle to pay for basic fundamentals of living, healthcare, annual taxes, etc. Here's a clip from Morning Joe that goes over the national budget.
Emphasize the individual federal employees are mostly not bad people, actually, because most human beings are not bad people. To the contrary, most people who are federal employees are doing what they do because they believe they're serving their country, and I respect that. I'm hopeful it's going to be even good for many of the individuals who may make a transition from government service back to the private sector.
That was Vivek Ramaswamy, who is part of a newly formed Department of Government Efficiency with Elon Musk and has pushed for making mass cuts to the federal workforce, insisting those very cuts will be beneficial to government workers. Joining us now, former Treasury official and Morning Joe economic analyst Steve Ratner.
Steve, let's just cut straight to this. And I know you're going to go through these charts, but this is something that when I hear these two guys talking about how they're going to cut $2 trillion from the budget, it's a joke. And it's a joke because this is something you and I have been obsessed about for a very long time, the national debt, getting the deficit under control. And I just looking at your first chart here, I mean, people need to understand Social Security and Medicare make up about 50% of what the government spends. You add defense and veterans benefits, that's another 20%. So you're up to 70%. You then add debt and how much it costs to service that debt. That's another 10%. So, Steve, before they even start talking about cutting these so-called federal employees that are bankrupting us, the United States government has already spent 80% of its budget on Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, vets, defense, and interest on the debt. So I love some of these other numbers. And again, forgive me for like killing Hamlet in the first act here. But, let's cut law enforcement. That's 1% of the budget. Let's cut sciences and medical research. We spend too much on that, they may be saying. 1% of the budget. Ag, 1% of the budget. Transportation, those pork barrel projects, it's going to bankrupt us. It's only 2% of the budget. Again, I will actually let you explain this far better than I am right now. But this is a scam unless they're going to slash Social Security and Medicare and and Veterans Affairs. They're never going to get to $2 trillion, so they need to just stop pretending.
You know, Joe, I feel like Vanna White. I'm just turning letters up here, and you're actually Pat Sajak telling people how it is.
It makes me so mad. But it's so disingenuous.
I'm happy to be your letter guy. But you said it exactly right, Joe. This is a completely disingenuous, unrealistic, ridiculous idea for the reasons you all said, that only 25% of the budget can really be cut. And even that, you rattled off a lot of programs that most Americans would say are really important to them. And so you're trying to cut, I can do a little bit of math. You're trying to cut $2 trillion, but you've only got $1.5 trillion of stuff that you can cut, and that would be cutting all of it. Now, I would say Trump has intimated about cutting some money from Medicaid. We're going to talk right over here about veterans, where there's some stuff on the chopping block. But what Musk and Ramaswamy have done as a first approximation is they've identified about $500 billion of spending that through a complicated legislative quirk, which I'm not going to get into, they think they can actually cut without Congress. But let's just give it as an example of the things they would like to cut. Veterans health care, $119 billion. Eliminate health care for veterans. We're going to talk about the impact of all this stuff in a second. NIH, $47 billion. Pell Grants for education, $22 billion. Head Start, we all know what that is, $12 billion. The FBI, maybe they'd actually like to cut that, $11 billion. These, by the way, would zero all this stuff out. These are not just trims. This is eliminating this stuff. Federal prisons, the SEC, and so forth. And all of that adds up to $516 billion. And so there's still a long way from their $2 trillion target, even if they got all this stuff and even if people accepted this. So, yes, Joe, your opening premise is right. It is ridiculous.
So Musk and Ramaswamy are heading to the Hill today to start pitching these cuts. We should note, though, by the time they arrive late afternoon, the Senate will have gone home by then. So they're still learning on the job, I suppose. Steve, you mentioned the VA and NIH are targets here. Talk to us about those cuts, what they'd mean.
Yeah, I just want to give these as examples of what how heavy the political lift would be to try to get this done. You're talking about 6.2 million veterans who are receiving health care from the Veterans Administration. And that number, this is a 2021 number, the most recent one we have, but that number is only going to grow. For example, they passed the PACT Act, which is to protect veterans who are hurt in burn pits and things like that. That passed by an overwhelming bipartisan consensus. So imagine the idea you go back then, a year or two later, and you say, I know you passed this thing by a bipartisan consensus, now we want to eliminate it. It just doesn't stand the test of reality. Then you talk about the NIH. The NIH is a truly great organization. It funds basic research that the private sector won't fund because there's not obvious commercial use for it. Put aside lung cancer, which had a lot to do with smoking, taking up smoking, cessation of smoking. But the NIH's impact, and it's not just the NIH, but they played a big role in all these different cancers that have come down, down, down in terms of incidence, deaths from these cancers, from colon and rectum, breast, prostate, lung cancer we talked about, cervix and stomach. All these cancers have come down, and you have the NIH to thank for a lot of it.
And let's be clear, as Trump tried to wage a war against the deep state or the swamp, without identifying whom they are until people speak out in opposition, and then he tries to smear them as the deep state or the swamp. However, it's literally the team of corrupt and corporate greedy driven oligarchs whom have spent their whole lives enriching themselves that he's surrounded himself with. Many of them cheating and cutting the lines, in many cases to get ahead. Others lucky enough to be born into the right last name and inheritance. And these individuals he's appointing to these positions, but it's no coincidence, folks. This is by design. And the only way that the Republicans can win. And they know that. In all honesty, I believe that the Electoral College should be removed altogether and that it should be one person, one vote. And honestly, this Electoral College is the only way that the Republicans have been able to win, aside from 2004 after 9/11 when George Bush won the popular vote. And somehow this election, supposedly Trump won the popular vote, even though he didn't even win 50% of the vote. In fact, over 51% of the people voted for someone other than Trump, and for Kamala or the independent candidates. So that means that more than half of the country did not vote for Trump. They voted for someone else. So this is not a mandate, as they claim. And the fact that the first issues that they seek to tackle are bills directed at attacking transgender people, which make up for less than 0.5% of our population. And they are seeking to take the needed resources such as Social Security and Medicaid, Medicare. And in the meantime, all we can do is continue to point out these outrageous people and their outrageous plans and how it will devastate our most vulnerable. We must call attention to these important resources and issues like Social Security that we've paid into our whole working life. We must reject this nonsense. We must call our local government officials and tell them to reject as well and to protect Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, including Medicaid for transgender people, many of which are discriminated against to the point where employment is impossible, especially after Trump and these corrupt bigot officials have spent the last 8 years attacking the transgender community, a small percentage of Americans whom are marginalized and misunderstood. When is America going to realize they have no real policies for the American people, no plans on making things more affordable? In fact, quite the opposite. But gerrymandering literally affected through the Electoral College. We must have better laws against gerrymandering, like 2 states in America that already have these policies and laws. And of course, they're Democratic states. Surprise, I mean, no big surprise there. Only the Democrats are serious about equal and fair elections. So, of course, they're Democratic states, right? But it should be this way across the nation. As Morning Joe points out in this video from an op-ed in the News and Observer, they point out that gerrymandering tipped the power in the Republicans' favor. Hakeem Jeffries would have been the Speaker of the House, and Democrats would have the control. But because of the gerrymandering, we have a much different result. This is beyond wrong. Let me play the clip.
Members set to serve in the Trump administration and former Congressman Matt Gaetz resigning last month, Johnson will have a 1-seat majority for the crucial first 100 days of the Trump administration. Meanwhile, a growing number of Democrats are pointing to the congressional map in North Carolina as a key reason they could not wrestle back control of the House. In a new op-ed for the News and Observer, Democratic Congressman Wiley Nickel of North Carolina writes in part this: North Carolina is a state of balance, a true purple state. With our nearly 50-50 split between Democrats and Republicans, North Carolinians expect fairness when it comes to how their voices are represented in Congress. But the Republican-controlled legislature's latest gerrymandered election maps did more than just silence voters in North Carolina. They reshaped the balance of power in Washington, D.C., costing Democrats control of the U.S. House of Representatives. And now, with Adam Gray's victory in California's 13th district, giving Republicans a bare 3-seat majority in the U.S. House, it's clear that gerrymandering in North Carolina tipped the scales in their favor and cost Democrats control of the U.S. House of Representatives. Congressman Nickel did not run for re-election this year, citing his district as one of 3 in North Carolina that were vastly reshaped by Republican gerrymandering. And Congressman Nickel joins us now.
So Congressman Dave Wasserman had brought this up about a week ago, saying, people don't understand, but a rigged map, he didn't, not his words, mine, but a rigged gerrymandered map in North Carolina was the difference between Democrats controlling the House of Representatives for the next 2 years and Republicans. And of course, you can go back to 2022, and it was Democratic snafus in redistricting in New York State that actually put Republicans in charge. So I'm just curious, how do we get past this gerrymandering, and how can states like yours actually reflect the will of the voters, the will of the people, and not the will of one party or the other, like rigging the maps?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I think the first point, really important from that opinion piece, is that Hakeem Jeffries ought to be the Speaker of the House right now. If it wasn't for Republicans in North Carolina rigging the system for my seat and 2 others, Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House. But the solution, of course, is we have to get partisan gerrymandering. We have to take it away. We have to let the voters choose the folks that represent them in Washington. I have a bill for that, the Fair Maps Act, that would require nonpartisan independent redistricting in every state. But this is the thing that is just wrecking Congress. And in this case, it's cost Democrats control because of a rare mid-decade gerrymander in North Carolina.
So, Congressman, let's go a little deeper about the state of play in your state. Obviously, a toss-up state, a battleground. Donald Trump did win, but as noted here, the Democratic won the governor's race, and now we have hotly contested seats in the House with gerrymandering involved. Is there any recourse there on the state level to potentially try to rectify the problem you just outlined?
And North Carolina is a state that has been gerrymandered by Republicans for quite a while. So there's not any, you can't look to our legislature to do anything. It's a gerrymandered legislature. The best hope we have in North Carolina is our courts. We just elected Democrat Allison Riggs by just over 600 votes back to the court. It's a 2-5 court. We've got to win Supreme Court races in North Carolina over the next 2 election cycles before we can get a court back that's going to do fair maps for our state. That's our hope in North Carolina. But nationally, Congress with a simple majority in the House and Senate can end partisan gerrymandering once and for all, and finally put this issue to rest. But it's the thing that's wrecking Congress. Least productive Congress in our nation's history. People should be upset, and they ought to point their finger at gerrymandering.
Congressman, I just want to follow up on Jonathan Lemire's question. What do you think is the right message to constituents in North Carolina, to North Carolinians who, over the next couple of years, are going to kind of see this and wonder why their own kind of identity as a purple state isn't being expressed in Washington? Is the answer here to run more Democratic candidates in races? Is it to organize? What exactly can be done? There is a Republican legislature, so it's kind of hard to overcome, is my understanding. What is your message? What should Democrats be doing?
Number one, we should be talking about fair maps, getting rid of partisan gerrymandering. But the fact is, Republicans do it much more than Democrats. It's wrong no matter who does it. But if you look at the districts that are heavily gerrymandered, North Carolina specifically, where you get districts that don't represent the majority will of the state. North Carolina, again, 50-50 state, 71% of the seats going to Republicans because of extreme partisan gerrymandering. But you look at the country, you've got a little over 10% of the seats in Congress that are pretty heavily gerrymandered for Democrats, but close to 40% of the seats for Republicans that are heavily gerrymandered. The other 50%, more fair districts, independent redistricting commissions in places like Arizona and Colorado. The answer is doing something that applies to all states evenly. But the only way we're going to get change is if folks make their voice heard. And if you're, again, looking at why this has just been a dumpster fire of a Congress and will be for the next Congress, too. The Republicans will never be able to get their act together with such a small majority. It's going to be a mess. And it's because of gerrymandering. There's just no incentive to work together when less than 10% of the seats are truly competitive. That's where we are right now. And it's the thing that we've got to fix.
Now, that's a problem. Democratic Congressman Nickel of North Carolina.
So America needs to wake up and pay attention and stop thinking that Democrats are just out to get you or out to get Trump. Gerrymandering is wrong, and the states should be fair districts. They shouldn't be able to change these districts all the time or in their favor for their own gain. And now more than ever, the fact-checking and independent news outlets like mine are very important, as are reliable news sources. It's always good to cross-reference as well. We must support our independent news and reliable news media outlets, such as MSNBC, which is one of the only corporate media channels I watch, and other independent news sources, as well as researching and creating my own reporting and journalism as well. Hopefully you've learned some things you didn't already know. And if you watched till the end, please drop a heart in the comment box. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Also, if you could please like my video and share it to your social media platforms, I would really appreciate it. While I continue to grow my channel and reach out to the masses, it helps a lot and it gets me out to the algorithms I wouldn't otherwise reach. So thank you for watching my video and have a great day.